Some wounds do not ask to be healed. They leave a trail and wait for someone brave enough to follow. Rain falls softly over Oak Haven Veterans Cemetery, turning the narrow paths silver beneath a colorless Virginia dawn. Staff Sergeant Caleb Mercer kneels in the wet grass before a headstone he has spent 6 years refusing to visit, one hand pressed against the cold earth, the other hovering over a line of bloody paw prints that ends beneath his knee. The blood is not heavy, just small red marks diluted by rain, each print growing fainter as it crosses the cemetery. Behind the stone comes a slow, uneven breath. Caleb freezes. For one long second, the entire world seems to hold still with him. The oaks do not move. The flags beside the graves hang limp. Even the rain appears to soften, as though the morning itself is listening. Then the breath comes again. Thin, tired, alive. Caleb rises carefully and steps around the headstone. A German shepherd lies curled against the back of the grave, his dark sable coat soaked flat against a lean frame. One hind paw is lifted slightly from the ground, the fur around it stained where a cut has reopened during the long walk. His muzzle is touched with gray, and a small notch marks the edge of his left ear. Around his neck hangs an old military chain. 2 dog tags rest against his chest, tapping faintly together whenever he breathes. Caleb does not move closer. The dog's amber eyes open. They are cloudy with exhaustion, but they lock onto Caleb with a steadiness that makes his chest tighten. There is no fear in them, no confusion, only recognition, the kind that arrives before words, the kind Caleb no longer believes he deserves. "Easy, boy," he whispers. His voice sounds unfamiliar in the open air, rough from disuse and the cold. The German shepherd does not growl. He does not lift his head. His tail moves once against the wet leaves. A small sound, barely there, yet it lands harder than a shout. Caleb studies the dog's face. Searching through years of memory, he has trained himself not to touch. A transport yard under desert sun. A row of kennels refuses to return it. Caleb swallows and looks away before the memory can sharpen. He turns toward the headstone. He still has not read the name. Rain runs from his hair and slips beneath the collar of his jacket, cold against his skin. He could leave. Call the county shelter. Let someone else handle this. That is what the old Caleb would have done. The man who returned from overseas with a box of medals he never opened and condolences he never answered. The man who learned that distance could look a lot like survival if nobody asked the right questions. But the dog watches him, not pleading, waiting. Caleb finally looks down at the tags. One is darkened with age. The other catches a gray thread of morning light. He reaches toward them, stopping when the shepherd's eyes narrow slightly. "I'm not taking them," Caleb says. "I just need to see." The dog's breathing slows. Permission, perhaps, or simple fatigue. Caleb lowers himself into the grass. His knees sink into the soaked earth. He touches the newer tag first and turns it over. The letters are scratched but readable. Mercer, Caleb J. The air leaves his lungs. He pulls his hand back as if the metal has burned him, though it is cold enough to numb his fingers. That tag disappeared 6 years ago. Lost during the last mission. Lost on the same day Gunnery Sergeant Owen Blake never came home. Caleb stares at the dog again. The notch in the ear. The dark stripe along the spine. The amber eyes that used to follow Owen across every training field from Quantico to Camp Lejeune. "No," Caleb whispers. The word breaks apart in the rain. The German shepherd shifts his head 1 inch closer. The chain slides across the leaves. Caleb's gaze drops to the second tag, but he cannot bring himself to turn it yet. He already knows what name waits there. Somewhere beyond the cemetery wall, a truck passes along the county road, its tires whispering over wet pavement. The ordinary sound makes the moment feel impossible. 6 years ago, Caleb was told the dog had not survived the evacuation. 6 years ago, he believed the last living piece of Owen had vanished with him. Yet here the shepherd lies, older, wounded, and miles from the Veterans Center where he should have been, wearing Caleb's missing tag like a promise carried through time. The dog tries to rise. His front legs brace, but the injured paw slips beneath him. Caleb moves without thinking. He catches the shepherd gently under the chest and steadies him before he falls. The dog presses his weight against Caleb's arm. Warm despite the rain. Real despite everything. Caleb feels the old training return to his hands, careful and certain. "I've got you," he says. The The words come out before he understands who they are meant for. The dog, Owen, or the part of himself he abandoned on that final day. The shepherd turns his muzzle toward the headstone and releases one quiet breath. Caleb follows his gaze. At last, he wipes the rain from the engraved granite. Gunnery Sergeant Owen Matthew Blake, United States Marine Corps. Beloved son, loyal friend, never left a brother behind. Caleb closes his eyes. The shepherd lowers one paw onto the soft earth before the grave. Then he nudges Caleb's hand toward the second tag. Caleb turns it over. Owen's name shines beneath the rain. And in that silent cemetery, with blood fading from the path behind them and dawn beginning to gather beyond the trees, Caleb understands one impossible truth. This dog did not come here to die beside his Marine. He came here because he had been searching for the one Marine still alive. 90 minutes earlier, Caleb Mercer is still telling himself he has only come home to leave. The dashboard clock reads 5:12 in the morning as his weathered Ford rolls past the edge of Stafford County beneath a sky the color of cold steel. Rain gathers in thin lines across the windshield, and the wipers move with a tired rhythm that fills the cab like an old metronome. Beyond the glass, familiar roads appear and vanish beneath the beams of his headlights. A gas station where Owen once bought coffee strong enough to wake the dead. A diner where two young Marines spent an entire night arguing over who had the worst singing voice. A narrow bridge above Aquia Creek where Caleb once believed every road in his life led somewhere worth reaching. He keeps both hands on the steering wheel. He does not look long at anything. On the passenger seat rests a brown envelope from a real estate office, thick with forms waiting for his signature. The house belonged to his father before it belonged to him. 2 bedrooms, a leaning porch, 12 acres of woods, and more memories than Caleb can afford to carry. By noon, the property will belong to a retired couple from Richmond. By sunset, Caleb plans to be heading west. No ceremony, no farewell, just distance. He has become skilled at leaving before a place can ask him to stay. The heater pushes dry air against his boots. Hanging from the ignition is a small brass whistle, darkened by age, its surface scratched from years inside a field pocket. Caleb reaches toward it when the truck hits a shallow pothole and the whistle taps against the steering column. His fingers stop an inch away. He has not used it in 6 years. Owen gave it to him during a training exercise after Atlas ignored every command Caleb tried. Owen had laughed, placed the whistle in Caleb's palm, and said, "He is not ignoring you. He is deciding whether you are worth listening to." Caleb had been annoyed then. Atlas had been sitting 10 feet away, ears forward, amber eyes bright with amusement. One quiet note from the whistle brought him running. The memory arrives without permission. Caleb closes his hand around the steering wheel until the leather creaks. "Not today," he says to the empty cab. His voice disappears beneath the sound of rain. He turns onto Route 610 instead of taking the direct road toward the house. The longer route adds 11 miles, but it avoids Oak Haven Veterans Cemetery. Caleb has driven around it every time he has returned to Virginia. Once for his father's funeral, once to settle the estate, once to sign the first set of sale papers. He tells himself the detour means nothing. A man does not owe a road an explanation. Still, when a green highway sign points toward Oak Haven, he looks straight ahead. The rain thickens near the tree line, washing the pavement in a pale sheen. The town has not fully awakened. Porch lights glow behind curtains. A bakery truck idles beside a curb. An American flag hangs damp outside the volunteer fire station. Caleb passes them all without slowing. The house key rests in his jacket pocket. The real estate envelope waits beside him. Everything is arranged. Everything is temporary. Then his headlights catch a mark near the shoulder. He drives past it before his mind understands what he saw. Red against gray. Small. Repeated. Caleb lifts his foot from the accelerator. The truck coasts another 50 yards before stopping. For several seconds, he watches the rain slide down the windshield. He could continue. An injured raccoon. A loose farm dog. Something ordinary requiring someone else's attention. He reaches for the gear shift, but an old instinct holds his hand still. Patterns matter. Owen used to say that. 1 mark is an accident. 2 marks are a question. 3 marks are a message. Caleb puts the truck in reverse and backs slowly along the empty road. The headlights settle over the shoulder. There they are. Paw prints. Large enough to belong to a German shepherd, spaced in an uneven but deliberate line. A faint trace of blood follows each impression, already thinning beneath the rain. Caleb steps out. The cold enters his jacket at once. Wet gravel shifts beneath his boots as he crouches beside the first print. He does not touch it. The toes point north. The stride is shortened on the left side. The animal is favoring one hind leg, but still moving with purpose. Not circling. Not wandering. Traveling. Caleb looks toward the woods. Pine branches move in the wind, their dark shapes bending above a narrow service path. The tracks cross the road, enter the mud, and continue toward a section of old iron fencing barely visible through the trees. Beyond that fence lies Oak Haven. Caleb stands very still. Rain taps against the brass whistle hanging from his ignition behind him. For one strange moment, he feels watched, though there is nothing ahead except trees, mist, and the faint red path disappearing between them. Then, far inside the woods, a dark figure steps into the open. A German shepherd. Lean. Soaked. Motionless. The dog does not bark. It looks directly at Caleb, turns, walks 10 measured steps toward the cemetery, and stops. Caleb's breath catches. He knows that movement. Every Marine who worked beside Owen's K-9 team knew it. Move. Check. Wait. A silent guide signal used when sound could not be trusted. Caleb takes one step forward. The dog takes one more. Caleb stops. The dog stops. The years between them seem to narrow beneath the rain. Slowly, Caleb reaches into the truck and removes the brass whistle. It feels colder than he remembers. He lifts it to his lips and gives one soft note. The sound travels through the wet trees, thin and clear. The German shepherd stiffens. His ears rise. For the first time, something changes in his eyes. Not surprise. Memory. Caleb lowers the whistle, but the dog does not come to him. Instead, he turns toward the cemetery and begins walking again, leaving a dark paw print in the mud with every careful step. Caleb looks back once at the envelope on the passenger seat, at the papers meant to close the final door on this place. Then he follows the dog into the trees. Caleb follows the German shepherd beneath the dripping pines, each step carrying him farther from the truck and closer to the place he has avoided for 6 years. The service path is barely visible beneath wet needles and fallen leaves. Rainwater runs through shallow grooves in the earth, washing at the edges of the bloody paw prints, but never erasing them completely. The dog remains 20 feet ahead, moving with a careful rhythm. Walk. Pause. Look back. Wait. He does not beg. He does not whine. He simply makes certain Caleb is still there. That is what unsettles him most. A frightened animal would search for shelter. A wounded animal would conserve strength. This one is spending what little strength he has to guide a man who has already spent years walking away. Caleb keeps the brass whistle closed inside his fist. Its edges press into his palm as memories begin to rise around him. Dawn drills in the wet fields at Quantico. Owen standing beneath a canvas awning with coffee in one hand and a training lead in the other. A younger German shepherd sitting at his side, alert enough to hear a whispered command through rain. Owen never raised his voice with dogs. He believed trust carried farther than volume. A good K-9 does not follow noise, he once told Caleb. He follows certainty. Caleb had laughed and asked what happened when the handler had none. Owen looked toward the dog and answered. Then the dog lends him some. A branch snaps beneath Caleb's boot. The shepherd stops instantly. His ears turn toward the sound, then toward the trees on the right. His body grows still despite the tremor in his injured leg. Caleb stops as well. For several seconds, neither moves. Wind passes through the pines with a low, distant hush. Somewhere beyond the fence, a metal ornament taps softly against stone. The dog studies the woods, decides there is no threat, and continues. Caleb recognizes the sequence. Assess. Clear. Advance. No stray learns that by accident. The path narrows near a drainage ditch filled with cold brown water. The shepherd steps across a fallen trunk, but his hind paw slips. He catches himself before falling and stands motionless, breathing hard. Caleb moves toward him. Let me help you. The dog looks back, amber eyes steady, then takes another step away. Not yet. Caleb understands. Trust has conditions, even when memory does not. He follows without reaching again. The iron cemetery fence rises through the mist a few minutes later, black bars shining with rain. A section near the ground has been bent outward, leaving an opening barely wide enough for the shepherd to pass. A strand of rusted wire hangs loose from the edge. A small smear of blood marks it. Caleb crouches and studies the gap. The dog has forced himself through despite the injury. Whatever waits beyond the fence matters more to him than pain. The shepherd lowers his body and slips through again. On the other side, he turns and waits. Caleb could walk another quarter-mile to the main gate. It would be safer, easier. The gate might even be open by now. But the dog is watching him with the patience of a partner holding position. Caleb removes his jacket, folds it over the sharp edge of the fence, and carefully climbs through. His boots land in wet grass among rows of pale headstones. Oak Haven stretches before him beneath the dim morning sky, quiet and orderly, each marker holding a name, a life, and a silence that no apology can change. Caleb feels the old pressure gather behind his ribs. He has imagined this place many times without allowing himself to enter it. In those imaginings, Owen's grave always stood alone beneath a hard white sun. He never imagined rain. He never imagined a dog leading him there. The shepherd turns north through the rows. He no longer looks back after every 10 steps. Now he trusts Caleb to follow. They pass flags darkened by weather, wreaths left from Veterans Day, and small stones placed carefully atop markers by hands that still remember. Caleb keeps his gaze low. He reads no names. Not yet. The bloody prints continue across the grass, bright for a moment, then pale beneath the rain. The dog slows beside an old oak whose branches stretch over the eastern section. A bronze plaque near the path lists the names of service members laid to rest beyond it. Caleb sees one familiar last name near the bottom and looks away before the first name can reach him. The shepherd notices. He stops. Caleb stops. The dog turns fully now and studies him with an expression too calm to be accusation. Then he steps closer than before. 10 feet. 8. 6. Rain beads along the dark fur of his face. The notch in his left ear becomes clearer. Caleb's hand tightens around the whistle. Something inside him recognizes the shape before his mind allows the name. "Where are you taking me?" he asks. The dog lowers his head, turns toward the farthest row, and walks on. Caleb follows past 3 more markers before the shepherd stops beside a grave hidden beneath wet leaves. He does not lie down. He stands at attention, injured paw lifted, eyes fixed on Caleb. Then, with deliberate care, he nudges the leaves aside with his nose. Gray granite appears beneath them. Caleb sees the United States Marine Corps emblem first. Below it, the beginning of a name. Owen. The shepherd looks up. His tail moves once against the grass. Caleb stares at the notch in the ear, the dark line across the back, and the amber eyes that have waited 6 years for him to remember. His lips part, but the name does not come easily. When it finally does, it is almost a prayer. Atlas. Atlas does not rush toward him. He does not bark or rise with sudden joy. He simply holds Caleb's gaze, as though the name itself has unlocked a door neither of them was certain would ever open again. Rain slips from the tips of his ears. His tail touches the grass once more, slow and careful, then becomes still. Caleb takes 1 step forward. Atlas remains beside the grave, his injured paw lifted, his posture weakened but disciplined. Even now, after all these years, he waits for a command. Caleb remembers the younger dog standing beside Owen on a training field at Camp Lejeune, body straight, eyes bright, every muscle ready. Atlas had been impossible to distract. Food, noise, strangers, passing vehicles, none of it mattered once Owen gave him a task. Caleb had admired that focus. He had also envied it. A dog always seemed to know where loyalty belonged. Men were not always so fortunate. "It is really you," Caleb says. His voice barely carries through the rain. Atlas lowers his head and presses his nose against the wet stone. Caleb looks at the grave fully for the first time. Gunnery Sergeant Owen Matthew Blake, United States Marine Corps. Beloved son, loyal friend, never left a brother behind. The final words tighten around Caleb's chest. He reads them again, though he does not need to. They are the reason he stayed away. Owen did not leave anyone behind. Caleb believes he did. Atlas shifts closer to the headstone and settles into the grass with a quiet breath. The movement reveals the old chain around his neck. 2 tags rest beneath his dark fur, one worn nearly smooth at the edges. Caleb recognizes Owen's service tag immediately. The second is turned inward. Atlas watches him notice it. Caleb crouches, keeping his hands where the dog can see them. "May I?" he asks, feeling foolish and sincere at the same time. Atlas does not move away. Caleb reaches toward the chain. His fingers brush the cold metal, and Atlas gives a low sound from deep in his chest. It is not a threat. It is a warning shaped by memory. Caleb stops. "I am not taking it," he says softly. "I promise." The sound fades. Atlas lowers his head again. Caleb turns the second tag over. For a moment, the letters blur beneath rain and disbelief. Then he sees them clearly. Mercer, Caleb James. His identification number. His blood type. His name. Caleb releases the tag and sits back on his heels. He lost it 6 years ago during the final mission. He remembers searching the pockets of his field vest after returning to base, then checking his gear twice, then a third time. He assumed the chain had broken somewhere during the evacuation. It had seemed like a small loss beside everything else. Owen was gone. Atlas was reported missing and presumed lost. A piece of stamped metal did not matter. Yet Atlas has carried it all this time. Through shelters, transport kennels, recovery centers, and years Caleb knows nothing about. The dog has kept his name close to Owen's. Caleb looks from the tag to the shepherd's face. "Where did you get this?" Atlas answers by placing his good front paw against the earth below the stone. Then he looks toward Caleb, steady and expectant. Caleb follows the motion, but sees only rain-darkened soil and scattered leaves. "What are you trying to show me?" Atlas pushes himself upright. His legs tremble. Before Caleb can help, the dog takes 2 careful steps and lowers his nose to the base of the grave. There, partly hidden beneath a small memorial wreath, something metallic catches the gray morning light. Caleb moves the wreath aside. A narrow brass key lies beneath it, tied with faded blue cord to a small piece of AK-9 unit patch. The fabric is worn, but the embroidered number is still visible. It belonged to Owen's unit. Caleb lifts the key. Beneath it is a folded strip of waterproof paper protected inside a clear sleeve. His hands shake as he opens it. The message contains only 6 words, written in Owen's familiar block lettering. For Caleb, when he comes home, the cemetery seems to fall silent around him. Caleb reads the line again. There is no accusation, no question, no demand for an explanation. Only the quiet certainty that one day he would return. Atlas leans against the headstone as though the last of his strength has been spent delivering the message. Caleb closes his hand around the key. "Who left this here?" he whispers. "A voice answers from the path behind him. "A man who waited 6 years for you to find it." Caleb turns. An elderly groundskeeper stands beneath a dark green raincoat, holding an umbrella in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. His eyes move from Caleb to Atlas, and sorrow softens his weathered face. "My name is Walter Hayes," he says. "Owen trusted me with something that belongs to you." Atlas tries to rise again, but his legs fold beneath him. Caleb catches him before he reaches the ground. The envelope can wait. The past can wait. For the first time in 6 years, Caleb chooses the living thing in front of him. Caleb lowers Atlas gently onto the wet grass and slides one arm beneath his chest, feeling how little weight remains beneath the soaked coat. The shepherd's breathing is shallow but steady. His amber eyes stay open, fixed on Caleb as if closing them would risk losing him again. Walter Hayes steps closer and folds the umbrella over both of them, though the rain has already soaked through Caleb's jacket. "There is a maintenance cart near the path," Walter says. "We can get him out without making him walk." Caleb nods, but he does not release the dog. For years, he has told himself that hesitation is caution, that distance is discipline. Now, kneeling beside Owen's grave with Atlas trembling against him, he sees what it has truly been. Fear dressed in a uniform it never earned. Walter returns with a small electric cart, and together they lift Atlas onto a folded canvas tarp in the back. Caleb sits beside him while Walter drives slowly between the rows of headstones. The motor hums beneath the rain. Flags move faintly along the path. Caleb keeps one hand against Atlas's shoulder, not holding him down, only letting the dog know he has not disappeared. At the cemetery office, Walter opens a narrow side room warmed by an old radiator. The air smells of coffee, damp wool, and furniture polish. Caleb lays Atlas on a thick blanket near the heat. Walter brings a clean towel and a bowl of water, but Atlas turns his head away from the bowl. His attention remains on Caleb. He has been doing that for years, Walter says quietly. Caleb looks up. Doing what? Waiting for someone who was not here. Walter removes his raincoat and hangs it beside the door. His hair is white, his shoulders slightly bent, but his movements carry the careful order of a man who has spent decades tending things that cannot thank him. Atlas came to this cemetery every year on the date Owen was buried. The Veterans Center is almost 4 miles from here. Staff members would bring him in the morning, and he would lie beside the grave until sunset. Caleb looks toward the window. Rain traces thin lines across the glass. Why was I never told? Walter studies him for a moment. You were. The answer is gentle, which makes it harder to receive. Caleb remembers unopened letters on kitchen counters, telephone messages erased without listening, invitations from men whose voices sounded too much like the past. He turns back toward Atlas. Then why today? Walter reaches into his coat and places the sealed envelope on the desk. Owen's handwriting covers the front. Caleb Mercer. No rank. No address. Just his name. Atlas disappeared from the center sometime after 3 this morning, Walter says. The night supervisor found a gate unlatched. They started searching before dawn. Caleb's jaw tightens. That still does not explain how he found me. The center sits near the highway. Your truck passed the outer road shortly after 5. The supervisor said Atlas was standing beside the fence when he heard it. Caleb almost dismisses the idea. A truck is only a truck. Engines do not carry names. Yet his Ford still has the same uneven idle Owen used to joke about. The same loose heat shield that rattles at low speed. Atlas had ridden in that truck during training weekends, his head between the front seats, his breath fogging the rearview mirror. Walter continues. He knew the sound. Caleb looks at the envelope again. Or he knew where this place was. Both may be true. He came for Owen. Walter says nothing. Caleb hears accusation in the silence, even though none is offered. He picks up the envelope but does not open it. The paper feels heavier than it should. Owen left this because he blamed me. Walter's brow furrows. Did he tell you that? He did. Not have to. Then perhaps you have been speaking for a dead man because you were afraid of what he actually said. Caleb stands so quickly the chair legs scrape the floor. Atlas lifts his head. The movement costs him. Caleb sees it and looks away. You do not know what happened. No, Walter says. But I know Owen came here before his last deployment. He gave me that letter, the key, and one instruction. He said to wait until you returned by choice. Caleb grips the envelope. I did not come here by choice. Walter glances at Atlas. Maybe not at first. The radiator clicks in the quiet room. Caleb sees the real estate papers in his mind, still waiting on the passenger seat. Sign. Sell. Leave. The plan had been clean before dawn. Now Owen's handwriting has reopened every door he came home to close. Keep the letter, Caleb says, placing it back on the desk. Walter does not touch it. It belongs to you. Then throw it away. Caleb walks toward the door. Behind him, claws scrape weakly against the blanket. He stops, but does not turn. Atlas is trying to stand. One front leg braces, then the other. His injured hind paw never finds balance. He takes a single unsteady step toward Caleb and sinks back down. The sound is small, almost nothing, yet it fills the room. Caleb closes his eyes. 6 years ago, he walked away believing there was no one left to follow him. Now an exhausted dog has crossed miles of cold rain to prove him wrong. Caleb turns, kneels beside Atlas, and presses his forehead gently against the shepherd's. You should have let me go, he whispers. Atlas places one trembling paw over Caleb's wrist. Walter lifts the envelope from the desk and sets it beside them. This time, Caleb does not push it away. Caleb remains on the floor beside Atlas, while Walter calls the nearest emergency veterinary clinic. The shepherd's paw rests over Caleb's wrist, light but deliberate. As if the simple contact is the last order he still has strength to give. Rain murmurs against the office windows. The radiator clicks. Somewhere in the outer room, an old wall clock measures the silence 1 second at a time. Walter returns and says Dr. Claire Bennett is preparing an examination room. The clinic is 7 miles away. Caleb nods, but his eyes remain on the sealed envelope beside the blanket. Owen's handwriting has not changed in 6 years. The letters are square, firm, and slightly tilted forward, as though even ink written by him refuses to stand still. Caleb reaches for it. His fingers pause over the edge. He has opened casualty reports, legal notices, and letters from families searching for words he never knew how to provide. None of them frightened him like this. Walter kneels on the opposite side of Atlas and places a folded towel beneath the injured paw. "You do not have to read it here," he says. Caleb studies the envelope. "If I leave with it, I might never read it." Walter gives a quiet nod. "Then perhaps here is where it was meant to be opened." Caleb breaks the seal. Inside is a single sheet of paper, folded twice. The first line begins without ceremony. "Caleb, if you are reading this, Atlas found you before you found your way back." Caleb closes his eyes. The room seems to tilt beneath him, not from shock, but from the strange kindness of hearing Owen's voice without sound. He continues. Owen writes that the final mission did not end the way Caleb has remembered it. The confusion, the failed radio contact, and the separation were not the result of Caleb's decision. Owen had chosen to remain behind long enough to guide two younger Marines and Atlas toward the evacuation route. He knew Caleb would return for him. He also knew returning would place more lives at risk. So Owen gave the order that Caleb has spent 6 years wishing he had disobeyed. "Move forward. Do not come back." Caleb lowers the page. "He knew," he whispers. Walter does not ask what he means. Atlas watches Caleb with half-open eyes. Caleb forces himself to continue. Owen explains that Atlas reached the evacuation point carrying Caleb's missing identification tag in his mouth. The chain had broken earlier that day, and the dog found it near Caleb's discarded gear. Atlas refused food and water until the tag was secured beside Owen's. Even after he was transferred to recovery care, he guarded both pieces of metal as though they were not objects, but people. The next line is shorter. "He kept your name because I asked him to." Caleb feels his throat tighten. He reads on. Owen had visited Oak Haven before deployment because his mother was buried there. He left Walter the brass key to the Veterans Canine Center, a place he planned to help operate after leaving active service. He believed working dogs and returning service members carried wounds that often recognized one another before anyone else could see them. If Owen did not return, the center would pass to a small board of local veterans. If Caleb ever came home, the key was to be offered to him, not as a debt, not as punishment, as a door. Caleb glances at the brass key still held in his palm. The final lines are written darker, as though Owen pressed the pen harder into the paper. "You will blame yourself because that is what you do when grief gives you no mission. Do not build a life around the worst day we ever had. Atlas knows your voice, your truck, your whistle, and the part of you that still wants to be found. My last command to him was simple. Find Mercer. Bring him home." Caleb stops breathing for a moment. The rain, the clock, and the radiator fade beneath the words. He looks at Atlas. The shepherd has not come to mourn beside Owen's grave. He has not crossed 4 miles in cold rain because he forgot where his first handler rests. He heard Caleb's truck beyond the fence. He remembered the broken rhythm of the engine, the brass whistle, and a command carried across 6 years. He followed Caleb's scent to the road, then returned to the one place he knew Caleb could no longer avoid. The grave was never the destination. It was the meeting point. "You were looking for me," Caleb says. Atlas's tail moves once against the blanket. Caleb bends closer, placing his hand beside the dog's muzzle. "All this time, I thought you belonged to him." Walter's voice is soft. Perhaps Owen believed Atlas belonged with whoever still needed saving. Caleb looks down at the final sentence. "Let him finish the mission, brother. Then forgive yourself for surviving it." The paper trembles in Caleb's hands. He does not weep loudly. There is no dramatic breaking point, only one. Tear that reaches the edge of his jaw and falls onto Owen's name. Atlas lifts his head and presses his nose against Caleb's knuckles. The gesture is weak, almost weightless, yet it reaches a place no medal, apology, or prayer has touched. Caleb folds the letter carefully and places it inside his jacket, close to his heart. Then he slides both arms beneath Atlas. "You found me," he whispers. "Now let me carry you." As he lifts the shepherd from the blanket, Atlas relaxes against his chest for the first time. Walter opens the door. Cold morning air enters the room, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. Caleb steps into it with Owen's letter, the brass key, and the living proof that some promises do not weaken with time. They simply wait until someone is finally ready to hear them. The veterinary clinic glows like a small lantern against the gray Virginia morning. Caleb carries Atlas through the glass doors while Walter follows close behind, holding them open against the wind. The air inside smells of antiseptic, warm cotton, and coffee left too long on a burner. Dr. Claire Bennett meets them before the front desk. She is in her early 40s, with dark blonde hair tied back and calm blue eyes that take in the injured paw, the soaked coat, and the exhaustion in Atlas's face without wasting a second. "Examination room 2, she says. "Keep talking to him." Caleb does not ask why. He already knows. Atlas has spent the morning following a voice from memory. Silence now might feel like abandonment. Caleb carries him down the short hallway and places him on a padded table beneath a bright white light. Atlas tenses when Claire reaches toward his leg. Caleb moves beside his head. "Easy, Atlas." She is helping. The shepherd looks at him, then allows Claire to work. She cleans the paw carefully, checks his temperature, listens to his chest, and studies the color beneath his gums. Her hands are gentle, but her expression grows more serious with every minute. "The cut itself is treatable," she says. "The larger concern is exhaustion and infection. He has been pushing far beyond what his body can manage." Caleb looks at the rainwater gathering beneath the table. He walked almost 4 miles. Walter stands near the door. More than that. He may have searched the highway before returning to the cemetery. Claire begins preparing fluids and medication. Then he has been running on purpose, not strength. Caleb understands the difference too well. Claire asks him to wait while she starts treatment. Atlas refuses to settle when Caleb steps back, his breathing turning quicker as the distance grows. "Stay near him," Claire says. "He has chosen his safe place." Caleb sits on the floor beside the table, his back against the cabinet. Atlas's head rests near the edge, close enough for Caleb to place his hand beneath the dog's muzzle without forcing contact. Outside, daylight slowly fades into evening. Walter leaves to notify the canine center that Atlas has been found. Claire moves quietly in and out, checking the fluid line and listening to the shepherd's heart. The clinic closes, the phones stop ringing, and the building settles into a nighttime hush broken only by the low hum of the heating system. Caleb remains on the floor. Owen's letter rests inside his jacket. The brass key lies in his palm. For years, Caleb has believed the past would grow quieter if he refused to speak its name. Instead, it has waited inside him, patient and unchanged. He looks at Atlas. "I went back for him," Caleb says softly. The dog's ear moves. "Not far enough. Not fast enough. That is what I told myself." He pauses, listening to the steady drip of fluid into the line. "They gave me an order to move forward. I obeyed it. Then I hated myself for obeying." Atlas opens his eyes. Caleb continues because the dog does not look away. "I thought surviving meant I had taken something that belonged to Owen. His years. His home. Every morning, he should have seen." His voice grows thinner, but he does not stop. "So I made sure I did not enjoy any of mine." The words remain in the quiet room. No one corrects him. No one offers an easy answer. Atlas breathes slowly against Caleb's hand. "I sold the house," Caleb says. "Or I was going to. I planned to sign the papers today and leave before anyone knew I was here." The shepherd's paw shifts beneath the blanket. Caleb gives a tired smile. "You ruined that plan." For a moment, Atlas's tail brushes faintly against the table. Caleb lowers his head. "I am sorry I took so long." The heart monitor changes. One soft tone comes faster, then another. Caleb looks toward the doorway, but Claire is already there. She checks the screen, then Atlas's pulse. "His temperature is beginning to come down," she says. "That is good." Caleb watches her face. Is he going to make it? Claire does not offer a promise she cannot keep. He is responding. Tonight matters. She adjusts the blanket and leaves them together again. Hours pass. Rain becomes a whisper against the windows. Caleb talks about small things now. Owen's terrible coffee. The time Atlas stole a sandwich from a captain and sat at attention as though innocence could be performed. The summer they trained beside the coast, where Atlas chased foam along the shoreline after duty ended. With every memory, Caleb feels something inside him loosen. Not disappear. Grief does not leave because it is asked. It changes shape when given somewhere honest to rest. Near midnight, Atlas lifts his head. The effort is slow, but certain. He places his bandaged paw over Caleb's wrist, exactly where it rested in the cemetery office. Caleb covers it gently with his other hand. The monitor settles into a calm, even rhythm. Claire watches from the doorway without interrupting. Caleb does not call it a miracle. The word feels too large for the quiet thing happening between them. A tired dog is breathing more easily. A tired man is no longer planning his escape. That is enough. Caleb leans closer until his forehead rests against Atlas's. "You finished your mission," he whispers. Atlas closes his eyes, not from weakness this time, but from trust. Caleb remains beside him until dawn begins to soften the dark windows, his hand beneath the paw that crossed 6 years to find him. Morning enters the clinic slowly, turning the dark windows from black to gray. Atlas sleeps beneath a clean blanket, his breathing deeper now, his bandaged paw resting near Caleb's hand. Dr. Claire Bennett checks him once more, then removes the fluid line and listens to his chest. "He is not ready for a long walk," she says, "but he is stable enough to leave this afternoon if someone stays with him." Caleb looks at Atlas. "Someone will." The answer comes without hesitation. It surprises him more than it surprises Claire. By noon, the rain has stopped. Walter returns with a dry coat, a leather leash from the Veterans Canine Center, and news Caleb does not expect. "The board is meeting today," he says. They were already planning to close the place by the end of the month. Caleb looks up from the chair beside Atlas. "Close it?" Walter nods. Donations fell. 2 staff members left. The building needs repairs, and there are more dogs than homes willing to take them. The brass key in Caleb's pocket seems to grow heavier. He remembers Owen's letter. Not as a debt, not as punishment, as a door. Claire helps Atlas into the back seat of Caleb's truck, where a blanket has been folded into a thick bed. The shepherd settles carefully, his head resting near the center console. Caleb starts the engine. The loose heat shield gives its familiar rattle. Atlas opens his eyes. His ears lift. For the first time, Caleb understands how a sound can become a promise. The Veterans Canine Center sits beyond a line of maple trees on the edge of town, housed inside an old brick school built after the Second World War. The white paint around the windows is peeling. One gutter leans away from the roof. A wooden sign near the driveway reads Blake Veterans Canine Center, though several letters have faded beneath years of weather. Caleb parks and opens the rear door. Atlas tries to stand. "Easy," Caleb says. "You have done enough walking for one lifetime." He lifts the shepherd carefully and carries him toward the entrance. The brass key fits the lock. Inside, the building smells of cedar shavings, dog food, laundry soap, and something warmer that Caleb cannot name at first. Hope, perhaps. Not the loud kind. The kind that waits in small rooms for someone to notice it. A dozen kennels line the main hall. Some hold older German shepherds with gray muzzles. Others hold Labradors, Belgian Malinois, and mixed-breed dogs retired from work or rescued after difficult beginnings. None bark when Atlas enters. One by one they stand. Tails move. Ears rise. A dark-coated shepherd near the end presses his nose between the bars. Atlas lifts his head from Caleb's shoulder and releases a quiet breath. The room answers with soft whines and the tapping of tails against kennel doors. Walter introduces the remaining staff. Maria Ellis, a former Navy medic who manages veterinary care. Thomas Reed, a retired police officer who trains dogs for mobility and emotional support. 2 volunteers from a nearby high school who clean kennels before class. They speak about Atlas with relief, but their faces carry the strain of people trying to hold together something larger than their resources. In a small office, financial reports cover a folding table. The numbers are clear. Heating repairs, food costs, medical bills, insurance. The center does not need a miracle. It needs money, labor, and someone willing to stay when leaving would be easier. Caleb looks through the window into the kennel hall. Atlas now lies on a blanket near the front desk. 3 younger dogs have settled nearby, watching him as though an old commander has returned. Owen planned all this. Caleb asks. Walter shakes his head. He helped begin it. Other people carried it after him, but they are tired. Caleb takes the real estate envelope from his jacket. The closing appointment was supposed to begin 40 minutes ago. His telephone has several missed calls from the agent. He opens the envelope and studies the sale agreement. The amount is enough to repair the center, pay its debts, and support operations for more than a year. It is also the last clean exit from Stafford County. Caleb finds the signature line. For 6 years, he has confused escape with peace. He has believed home was only a place where the dead knew his name. Then Atlas opens his eyes across the room and looks directly at him. Find Mercer. Bring him home. Caleb finally understands. Owen never meant a house, a cemetery, or even this town. Home is the place where a person becomes useful to the living again. Caleb tears the sale agreement once, then again, until the signature line disappears between his hands. Walter watches, without speaking. My father's property has a barn, Caleb says. It needs work, but there are 12 acres, fenced pasture, and room for training trails. Walter's eyes soften. You were planning to sell it. I was planning a lot of things. Caleb places the brass key on the table, then closes his hand around it again. Call the board. Tell them not to close. What should I tell them changed? Caleb looks toward Atlas, who has begun to rest his head beside Caleb's old identification tag. Tell them a Marine finally followed an order. That afternoon, Caleb drives to his father's house instead of the highway. Atlas sleeps in the back seat while the sun breaks through the clouds, casting long bands of gold across the wet Virginia fields. The real estate sign still stands near the road. Caleb stops, pulls it from the ground, and lays it in the truck bed. When he returns to the cab, Atlas is awake. Caleb reaches back and touches the shepherd gently between the ears. We are staying, he says. Atlas closes his eyes again, and the road ahead no longer feels like a retreat. By early April, the 12 acres behind Caleb's father's house no longer feel abandoned. The old barn has been repaired, the pasture fence stands straight again, and a new wooden sign near the gravel drive carries the name Blake Veterans Canine Center. Every morning, sunlight reaches through the budding maple trees and falls across training paths worn into the grass by boots and paws. Some of the dogs arrive frightened by open doors. Some of the veterans arrive frightened by silence. Caleb never asks either group to explain too much on the first day. He has learned that trust grows best when it is not pulled from the ground before it has roots. Atlas spends most mornings beside him. The bandage is gone, though a thin pale line remains beneath the fur of his hind paw. Age has softened his pace, but not his attention. He watches every new arrival with the calm patience of a dog who understands that finding someone is only the beginning. Sometimes a veteran sits alone on the barn steps, unable to enter. Atlas walks over, settles nearby, and waits without touching them. He does not demand courage. He lends them his. The center does not transform overnight. Bills still arrive. The roof still leaks during hard rain. Caleb wakes some nights with Owen's final letter in his mind and the old guilt pressing against his chest. But now, when darkness follows him out of sleep, Atlas is there beside the bed, breathing slowly. Caleb places one hand against the shepherd's back and remembers that survival does not have to be defended. It can be used. On a clear Sunday morning, Caleb places 2 polished identification tags on the kitchen table. One bears Owen's name. The other bears his own. For 6 years, they hung together around Atlas's neck. Today, Caleb removes Owen's tag from the chain and slips it into his coat pocket. His own remains with Atlas. The shepherd watches him from the doorway, ears forward. It is time, Caleb says. They drive toward Oak Haven beneath a pale blue sky. The same road that once felt like a boundary now passes quietly beneath the truck. Dogwood blossoms brighten the edges of the woods. Fields shine with new grass. The loose heat shield still rattles at low speed, and Atlas lifts his head at the familiar sound before resting it again near the center console. Caleb smiles. Some things do not need fixing. At the cemetery gate, Walter Hayes waits with a small bundle of fresh white flowers. He looks older than he did in November, but lighter somehow. Good morning, Staff Sergeant, he says. Caleb takes the flowers. Just Caleb now. Walter glances toward Atlas. I doubt he agrees. Atlas steps down from the truck carefully. His paw touches the pavement without pain. Together, they follow the path between the headstones. No rain hides the names today. Caleb reads some of them as he passes. He does not know every person buried there, but he understands something about the families who still bring flowers, coins, folded flags, and small stones. Grief is not a single road. It is a town filled with doors, and everyone enters differently. Owen's grave rests beneath the old oak, exactly where Caleb remembers it. Spring grass has replaced the wet leaves. The stone is clean. The words remain unchanged. Beloved son, loyal friend, never left a brother behind. Atlas approaches first. He lowers his nose to the earth, then sits beside the marker. He does not collapse against it. He does not wait for someone who will not rise. He simply keeps watch. Caleb kneels and places the flowers at the base of the stone. For a while, he says nothing. Wind moves softly through the branches overhead. Somewhere beyond the cemetery wall, children laugh in a neighborhood yard. Life continues without asking permission. Caleb takes Owen's identification tag from his pocket and lays it against the granite. The metal catches the morning sun. The center is open, he says. We have 11 dogs, 6 veterans in the training program, and 3 more coming next month. Atlas turns his head toward him. Caleb places a hand on the shepherd's shoulder. He found me, just like you knew he would. His voice tightens, but it does not break. I wish you were here to see it. The wind lifts one corner of the blue cord tied around the brass key in Caleb's pocket. He closes his fingers around it. The key no longer feels like something left behind by the dead. It belongs to a door used every day by the living. Caleb looks at Owen's name one final time. Mission complete, brother. Atlas rises. For a moment, he stands between Caleb and the grave, amber eyes bright beneath the spring light. Then he turns toward the path. Caleb follows. At the edge of the row, he looks back once. Owen's tag rests beneath the carved emblem of the United States Marine Corps. The white flowers move gently in the breeze. Nothing miraculous appears. No voice comes from the sky. No sign asks him to stay. There is only peace, quiet and ordinary, waiting where guilt once stood. Caleb and Atlas walk out of Oak Haven side by side. Their footprints cross the soft ground in 2 steady lines, clean and unbroken, leading away from the grave and back toward the living.